So this is going to be a very short, hopefully short, introduction to this bioenergetic assessment tool, this equipment that also does do some therapeutics, but it's something that is highly appropriate for different practitioners, especially acupuncturists. We've been around about 20 years, the company's energy development. What you're looking at right here is the front interface of the AO Scan mobile device. We had a desktop system, we still do. Again, been around 20 years. It's around 35 to 40,000. This mobile version will have about 90% of what that other system does, but this is only 475 or 575 and a monthly fee of 140 to 199. So it's way more easy to access. This one's portable, and again, it has all the same great stuff, same functions. But acupuncturists absolutely love using this. So I'm going to give you a demo on this company's new product here. So the mobile just came out a few months ago, and by the next 2 weeks, we should have pretty much everything the Pro level system has. That was the one that's a lot more expensive. So let me just give you a quick backstory. This is actually Russian technology from the Federal Space Agency in the 80s. So they basically looked at all of the field of biophysics, all the different researchers, the entire field of electrotherapy, starting with Tesla and even a little bit earlier and moving up through the years. That was they spent a huge amount of money. It was the largest research and development project, rolling all of the fields together, from like microcurrent to pulsing magnetic fields, radio frequency and radionics. I mean, all kinds of different things. Even some research from bioacoustic therapies, and so nobody had ever really done that before. They ended up with a database of 114,000 frequencies. Part of the goal was to map the body with frequency equivalents, and nobody else had that database. It was theirs, and up until 2008, Energy Development came along and offered to build a whole front-end interface and license it from the Russian government. So again, nobody else has this database. This database was constructed from trying to compare, first taking all the additional frequencies that were out there, all of the different approaches you can scan the body and affect the body electromagnetically. And what set this apart was that they did a lot of work through the years on trying to test urine, blood, saliva, feces, doing every type of test and scan they could at the time. And even some things that they have kept top secret, if you will, that they won't share with us how they got the values. But their goal was for accuracy. Can we take a non-invasive approach to affect the body energetically, extract information and data, and how close does that correlate with actual traditional lab tests or traditional other types of scans, looking at the structure or looking at the function? So currently, once Energy got that, they built the front-end software for it, the interface. They continued to work with some of the later technologies we had, obviously in the year 2000s, and presently we have so many additional tests. So we basically checked over all of that work, that database, try to improve the accuracy even further. At this point, we're around 85% for a huge amount of biometric information. This completely revolutionizes and vastly improves the therapeutic outcomes that an acupuncturist can achieve. So I'll roll into this. This is just the basic mode, keep in mind. So if you're impressed by this, the pro level is even like more sophisticated, but this is all very easy to use. So this is the front main screen here. You have different programs. This Vital Scan is kind of something that pulls data similar to lab panels when you send it in. It's on 550 different components in the body. Okay. And then the comprehensive is when you want to take a look at the organs. So you have 130 different organ systems. And when you see the details on that, yeah, you're going to be excited if you're an acupuncturist actually watching this. The Cepheus Subtle Energetic Imprinter, this is when you're getting more into like wanting to do different ways of transmitting energy and information on different bands, basically. So it's a little bit more of a therapeutic program. There's a lot that you can do with it. So we're not going to get into that quite yet. So in order of this presentation, I'm just going to kind of show you a few of the different reports and data that you can get on your client. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're getting some of that information in the scan. So we'll just roll right into it. So the first thing I would want to say is that we do also do voice analysis as well right here. And it prints out what are kind of like the suppressed frequency tones in the harmonics of your voice. What are the overcompensating and suppressed? There is actually a lot of good research out there. I would only tell you that other voice analysis tools are not that accurate. They can be for some things, but it's kind of hit or miss. Because we are pulling information, and because of the nature of that database and the work that was put into that, we algorithmically could cross-reference a lot of the voice analysis information and research that was out there, and basically improve upon the accuracy and fill in a lot of missing pieces as well. So what we can do with ours is kind of in combination. It's pulling information not just from the voice, so I should clarify that. And then once you actually come up with values here, like what actual light frequency is good to work with, what notes, which can actually be played back in custom recordings that we produce in here that you can send to your client, or you can sell to them or use in the office. We also go into the organs. And we actually can cross-reference this with the other scans that you'll see in a moment. So you can actually bring all of the pieces of information together for a person. Now, just like Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine and Japanese, we also are actually calculating and reading what we pick up in the voice, but also to neuropeptide frequency signatures that are lighting up these different regions in the body. So we're correlating actually emotional and mental states with the biochemistry world, which is actually the world of physics when we get down to it. And this is spooky accurate. So usually when you show people these reports and it prioritizes the issues for them, it's usually extremely relevant to the person that day or that week or that month or whatever. Plus a lot of the other data that I'm going to show you that you can give them, usually if they know their own health condition and symptoms and stuff like that, you'll be able to tell a lot of things about a person, and they'll say like, how the heck did you know that? Or yes, I did have that issue a few years ago, or that's the level of detail this can provide. So even if people don't believe or understand the science, even yourself, the proof honestly is in using it and just seeing the values and seeing how it actually matches up. So this is the vital report. You can keep scanning down and there's more things there. So 550 different segments. This is it scanning. You can optimize if you want to adjust all those parameters, or if you just want to actually get the information and start to actually use that for doing some acupuncture or herbal suggestions. I'm going to zoom in. This is a little closer here. So as you can see, it's a huge amount of values. So, obviously you would be reading the pulse and evaluating the blood and the heart in different sorts of ways. This is also us, a little bit more of like a Western medicine sort of presentation or approach, even though, again, all this is being extracted on a frequency level and through different sorts of frequency bands, which I will briefly touch on later. It tells you what's in range and out of range on the current scan and the previous scan, so you can track progress. Usually things that don't change are like long-standing issues and the body doesn't have the energy resources for that. It might be changing other things. You can track trends that the person is having as well by things that don't move or over long periods of time in your repeated scans. But this is just like everything you can go on with the blood. Our accuracy actually is superior to even like a blood test, because when you take blood out of the body, there's a lot of environmental influences that can actually disturb and affect the levels of different things. So the ideal situation, of course, is testing the blood while in the body, like the paramagnetic effects that the heart actually influences on blood. When you remove that from that paramagnetic field, that already starts to change it. There's a link basically between physics and biochemistry. So I'm just going to keep going down here. You can see nutrient levels, These values absolutely will change with changes in diet. Same thing here, digestive functions. Inflammation, you can see changes usually with diet and different supplementations as well. Insulin. So we, of course, do go into organs here. Amino acids tend to change more regularly depending on your diet and supplementation. Same thing, diet. These values can switch day to day or week to week depending on what the diet is. Same thing, minerals are a little slower to change, obviously, but you can absolutely 100% see changes when you supplement with, like, let's say iodine. You will see a change in that, usually within like a week, something like that. So pretty cool stuff. I'm gonna just keep on scrolling down for y'all, just to see things. See, so when we're getting into things like this, like parts of the body, or brain and nerves, cranial nerves, I'm going to show you another report where you can actually see that visually, and you can cross-reference this data in what's called an intelligence scan. So it takes all the parameters that the person needs to work on or look at, and you can do queries, and you can get to the root cause of what's affecting, what's creating this, what's going on with the optic, what other parts of the body are involved in this. Is it even like a bacteria or a virus that could be involved here? You can actually cross-reference all of that in other scans. So even if this overwhelms you a little bit, there's ways to simplify it. So these are always, I think, really important here too. Okay, so cardiovascular, this is more than you could even gain with a stress test and a lot of the classic cardiovascular tests. Collagen, endocrine glands, this is helpful, obviously. Getting your neuroendocrine system back online with acupuncture, hormones as well. One thing that is supposed to be on, I don't think it's in this one, we also do have meridians, and we do actually mention meridians that are being affected, but it does not appear on the actual scans. By the way, we have the largest bacterial, pathogenic, or zootic organism list. Minerals, I'm just going to keep on going here. Mold, parasites. And we have under Cephi, by the way, we actually have homeopathic remedies you can make. You have frequency programs that can be run that specifically can target these. That is a whole other video I could get into about how we actually will be able to more accurately target the exact frequency range that this is in, because this can actually change. These things can get defensive and actually change their frequency. And we can actually track down where these things are in the body. So if these things, if you're trying to clear them from one area, they may actually retreat into another area of the body. So to my knowledge as a researcher of healing and wellness technologies, there's not really anything else out there that can track regionally in the body where pathogens are and where they're going. And there's even other things where the body can actually in real time choose different algorithmic frequencies in order to eradicate these things. There's a lot to it when you want to clear things. And the body actually ultimately should make the determination of what it needs. So our technology is actually capable of that, of giving the body that sort of feedback or self-regulatory capacity. So where was my, there we are. This is the organ comprehensive scan. So obviously something like this is really helpful. This usually matches up perfectly with what chiropractors are finding. Obviously this is all pertinent information for acupuncture as well. And of course, like if you saw C5 here, and obviously you know what, the purpose of these areas as correlated to organs. You can also take a look at the organs individually and how they're related to this. There's just a lot of additional data where you can say, oh my gosh, there's a 1 here, 1 isn't good, what's going on, and do a deeper dive, basically. What's cool is that if you did acupuncture, let's say, for example, because you wanted to improve conduction and other processes here and in the organs affected, What you can do is you can actually use our technology to track your progress with the needle. So let's say you did a 15-minute session, right, for this area, because it had a lot of things going on with the neck. You would actually see those values change, and you could see to the degree of how much it changed, how effective your cupping or your needlework was essentially in that area. So you can track that in almost real time in a sense, which is really fantastic. And you can also see how whatever you did here, if it has an effect anywhere else as well. So let's move to a different one. There's teeth. You can look at the teeth. Just a little sidebar comment. Obviously, in acupuncture, they don't get too deep into the teeth, but we all know that each tooth is connected to a different meridian line, and obviously, the health of the mouth has a huge dramatic effect on the rest of the body. We actually have a whole separate dental program that is in the pro version, and that you can look at the entire mouth. You can look at not just these sorts of valuations of what's going on in those areas that I can explain some other time, but you can also look at every layer, and you can look at causal factors for the issues that you see. You can look at the cranial nerves and muscles that are connected to different areas of the mouth. You can look at the lymphatic areas that are connected again to the teeth and the gums, etc. So it's super important, if you really want to help people in acupuncture, to have a very clear picture of what's going on in the mouth. And the dentists just absolutely go bananas. We're finding issues underneath of crowns. We're finding root canal infections that they didn't even realize were there. A lot of dentists don't usually believe we can do that until they actually try it out, or the patient has this and they bring it to their dentist, and then they say, hey, take a look at this tooth. They do some tests, and then they find the exact same results. So these are just like tons of organs: the lungs, ligaments, kidneys. If you were doing something on their kidneys and you wanted to give them some herbs for the kidneys, you could track how different parts and the functions were actually improving, and you could combine that, of course, with the needles as well. If you need to work on this vein, for example, or just this artery line. And we also have something called AO Scan Body, so you'll be able to actually look at this organ and all of the interconnected structures in 3 dimensions, and you can scroll around the body. You can peel off different organ layers as well. You can click on each of these values on the AO Body program, and you can actually look into causal factors. There's so much that you can do. It's incredible, but it's also easy to do. So the AO Body, because it's in 3 dimensions versus these static images, you're going to be able to do way better assessments and diagnostics about where you should put the needle, basically. And of course, you do have the meridians as well that you can look at. We're going to actually clean this up in a week or two, so that this highlights differently, so you don't have to deal with as many lines. Obviously, there's a lot more here because there's so many arteries in the head and the neck region. There's currently no other program that goes into this level of detail in terms of the valuations of the different arteries. But also, of course, this is something crucially helpful. All these things are interconnected, obviously, with meridian systems and acupuncture points. So we can also look at the lymphatic vessels in the head. We can pretty much look at all the major organ systems that you'd want to look at. Let's see what's in part 2 that I was going to tell you about. So we have muscles, organs, lymph, the blood. We can look at the blood in more depth here. The liver, of course, is always my favorite, and you can track the progress with herbs as well with this. You can cross-reference it with, the liver section over here, so you can really get to the root of what type of protocol you really need to put this person on. Where's my liver? Anyways, somewhere on here, you can look at all the liver different functions. And so, with all this data, it becomes very easy to say, hey, these types of herbs and this sort of, these areas I'm going to work on with the acupuncture. But the other thing is that we actually can do assessments with the actual supplements as well. So let me show you that to you. So basically what we can do is, if you have an herbal line or an herbal brand line that you work with, you can actually scan that into the system, and there's a lot of science to explain how we're looking at both the magnetic component, and so the electron shell, we're looking at the magnetic level, the full electromagnetic spectrum of a substance, and how we're able to actually capture enough of it where we can do a resonance scan with it. So if, for example, you're looking at parts of the heart, you can even go into like specific aspects of the heart, and then you can preload your herbal or supplement line, your professional line in here, and figure out exactly what the person needs. You can do essential oils. We have some preloaded things we can have in there for you. You can also preload your own things as well. And so this, you can obviously do your muscle response testing in other ways, but most practitioners find, a lot of acupuncturists find that this is more accurate than even the other testing that they're doing. Here you can also type in just a specific type of compound that you may find in these lines, and actually from that you would have actually scanned in, that has the energetic signature, and you can see today or that moment if it's going to be in resonance with that person, how much it stresses out the body. It takes an average of it, how much and you can also do this comparing different lines too. So if a couple of the lines have the same herb or have the same compound, you can actually compare for the client which brand is the body actually is more resonant with, based on the feedback that we're getting through the nervous system and the brain, which I'll explain in a second. So yeah, that's what you can do with herbs and herbal stuff. So this can actually, a lot of practitioners end up selling a lot more of those. I'm going to show you in a second that you can do this remotely as well with your clients. So you don't have to just, obviously acupuncture you need to do in person, obviously, but if you also want to sell supplements and other things, do consultations with their health, give them diagnostic information, and sell that. There's a lot of other ways you can make a lot of good income with this program. So I'm going to move over here to a presentation on more of the how. So right here we have a bone conduction headset. So this is not a normally speaker, like acoustic sort of headset. Bone conduction has a transducer in it, it's a coil that oscillates. A transducer is capable of taking one energy type and frequency and turning it into another type. So what we do is we have a database of 119,000 frequencies that have to do with 330 different systems in the body, that give rise to around 300 different components, or 3,000 I should say, and so that database is being referenced. It sends a signal when you're running the scan in here. It goes directly to the auditory nerve. Some of this also is influencing and traveling along the vagus system also. And a lot of this is positioned over the actual oscillator coils, over the trigeminal nerve. And so what we're doing is more of like a transducing vibratory induction of, instead of using electrodes like you might be familiar with, electrodermal, EAV, electroacupuncture, microcurrent, like that kind of world, there's actually a lot of inaccuracies that can happen because of that, to not get into it. But there's different things in the body, different other things that can disturb it in the environment, the skin itself. Anyways, we'll save that for another conversation. So it's a little more accurate to go straight to the brain, because through the trigeminal nerve, this is connected to the spine, it's connected to the thalamus, it's connected to the other 12 cranial nerves, to different regions and functions of the brain. We are actually sending a signal that's traveling in here. It's going to the somatosensory cortex. It's going to the postcentral gyrus. It's going to the homunculus of the brain. If you need to look that up, definitely check it out. It's pretty cool. And those parts of the brain are already monitoring. They already have the pathways to all of the regions in the body that we need to send and receive frequency information from, frequency signals. And when that comes back to our device, we have an algorithm that's basically taking the signal back through the transducers, through the headset, and looking and comparing the values. It's comparing, like, so for the liver, if we have a bunch of frequencies associated with different liver functions from 1,000 different subjects, we took the healthiest average of functions from all those individuals and compiled that. This was in Russia and even in the United States. Then we would basically be comparing your function or the patient's functions in the liver to that database, and then basically making little tweaks and shifts if you want to run the optimizing functions. Or you could do that with herbal medicines and massage and cupping and moxibustion and needles, of course. So signals actually are going back through those central areas in the brain. The brain then knows already where to carry that particular compatible signal. So the signals for the liver are kind of universal. It's like a universal frequency patterns. So the brain already knows how to relay that down through the nervous system. And then what happens is, here's an example of like one cell. Okay, so imagine this is your liver cell. The frequencies would come through here, through the nervous system regionally, travel through the medium of water, okay, through the medium of structured crystalline water. That is actually intracellular, extracellular, and then actually on a frequency level can affect transmembrane and produce transcription factors and actually have epigenetic effects, changing your genes. This is well proven. So if you're not familiar with the field of electrotherapy, that's old information about how you can turn on and off genes. There's many things that can do that. Obviously, stress can do it. Your mind, your emotions, all kinds of things. All right, so we're moving on here. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. So with the lock and key model, these are normally bio or molecular compounds that fit into receptor cells, and this is how all kinds of processes happen and your body works. Now, what is not as super mainstream in like medical texts, but there's plenty of studies and research for quite some time now, is that, and it fits into the field of biophysics, is that this space, you see this space in and around these molecules, these biomolecules, which could be all kinds of things, tens of millions or tens of thousands. That space is usually water, and there's frequencies constantly being transmitted back and forth between the cell and its receptors, and going out, and then actually pulling in through the receptors of like this biomolecule, guiding it into this area. So there's a whole guidance system on a frequency level. So there's many different ways you can actually influence first the efficiency of making sure that certain biomolecules are able to attach and transfer and connect with specific organelles and organs to do certain sorts of processes. So that's incredible, and that's about raising the amplitude of certain sorts of frequencies to do that. The other thing is that this can also be accomplished, as I said before, remotely, or on a pure frequency level. You don't always need the actual molecule. So that's a way of actually regulating. If this cell, for example, or organelle, hasn't been receiving certain biomolecules for quite some time, a lot of side effects can happen from that. So you can kind of jumpstart the process that has degenerated inside the cell by sending the right frequencies that it normally would receive from those biomolecules. And then once things start to kind of function again inside, more of these processes can happen with the actual biomolecules. Remember that biomolecules are just composed of atoms, and these things are bound together, these molecules and such, by electromagnetic bonds. And what we've learned in electrotherapy through many studies is that those electromagnetic bonds have different frequency resonance potentials, depending on the element, and the complexity of the molecule. So there's a huge amount of research out there you can find on PubMed and all over the place, getting into all that. Same thing here. You can influence ion change across mitochondria, all kinds of things. Ions, remember, we're getting more into the subatomic domain. So again, on a frequency level, you have reception, and you can actually create electrical signals inside the cell, affect protein, because there's actually voltage sensitive proteins. if you notice, the way that a radio works and many other signals traveling through distance, which is actually air and water, there's water in the air, just like inside your body. If you can imagine the AO Scan mobile device is kind of like a radio wave base station transmitting, and literally there actually are radio frequency bands coming from the actual mobile device, just FYI. That's part of how it works. Part of how we broadcast things into the body and how we actually extract it out through the transducer headset. So imagine we have an external signal on the outside of the body, or suddenly on the outside of the cell, or going down into the organ. You have the receptor, and of course, well, I'll just continue. Normally there's a transduction process, whether it's inside the cell or the organ, or if you're sending it through a radio. You have an amplifier usually, and then you have an actual response, cellular response, or the body's response to what we're sending from the device. So that response. So one thing to note here about a little bit about how our device also reads information is that sending an external signals in for all of those different areas in the body, aspects we want to measure, we're waiting for a response back, almost like sonar in a way. You may not know this, but a speaker can also work like a microphone, and a microphone can also work like a speaker. So these things can actually both send in, and they can also go backwards the same direction in certain respects. So there's a whole kind of two-way flow process between the brain, nervous system, and the body, and the brain body and our actually device and our database. So we're trying to compare a lot of values algorithmically and seeing how they match up in sympathetic resonance. Okay, so through sympathetic resonance, then we're actually finding missing notes that need to be amplified more. Imagine these notes could each be equivalent to, it depends on what we're talking about. It could be certain molecular compounds associated with producing ATP. They might be missing a couple notes, so the efficiency or the amount of ATP produced is lagging or subpar, suboptimal. It could be notes that normally add up to create a vitamin. And it could be just a lot of different things. Each note could be a different process in the liver, metabolic process or pathway. So there's a lot of information you can actually read. Sympathetic resonance, if you don't know what that is. So we are taking essentially an external frequency database, but we are bringing those vibrations into the body, okay, inside, and we're letting the body take it from there. And so like in this tuning fork experiment, if two tuning forks are identical, they have the same mineral composition, so essentially the electromagnetic bonds are at the same angles, and if you strike one of the tuning forks, it'll actually create vibratory compression waves. And that if this is then the same match, tuned the same, then it actually will receive that and start to vibrate as well, or resonate at a distance, even if this one was not struck. So we are using some of those principles and more to actually read the different organs and processes. And we kind of, it's like tuning a piano. If you hear one key is off, imagine if you could play a recording of that key, how that key should sound, the perfect pitch. And if you have that recording, you can keep on tweaking and tuning the string, right? Until eventually you keep on playing the scale and listening to the scale. And as you turn and you twist and you tune that key, eventually you find the resonance of that scale. And then the sheet music, the entire song can be played. That's literally the perfect analogy for a lot of how this technology works. That may sound really super advanced, and it would, because it takes actually a lot of research to catch up with, honestly, like the last 100 years of a lot of research in this area. So if this is like, oh my gosh, this is a little advanced, I mean, again, it should be. And if you do want to really dive deeply into this world of biophysics and science and see how that actually is a perfect marriage with even like what chi energy is, how that's connected to the ether force, the etheric energy, which downsteps into and through the electromagnetic spectrum, how this is related to scalar fields, All these sorts of things actually are a perfect explanation of the connection of physics with Chinese medicine, and furthermore, how these have their correlations with biochemistry. All the information actually is there. The sequence of understanding is there. And again, we're not just here selling an amazing product at a really great value. We also do have extensive education courses if you want to go down that rabbit hole and truly know the science, the metaphysics, which is kind of rewarding if you study something like Chinese medicine or Japanese acupuncture or whatever, because then you see exactly like what the qi is, if you will, or just how organs are affected by your mind and things like that. One last thing I do want to actually show you all is there is another really great external attachment tool that is just about to be released for the mobile. It's been out for, I don't know, 15 years with the original more expensive equipment, but this will be out soon for the mobile version. But with this kit, you can actually collect hair, saliva, and urine from your clients anywhere remotely. So I didn't mention before, but as long as somebody has that headset and you send it to them, you can work with the client remotely. And the accuracy is just as good because we actually use radio frequency of bands of 3G and 4G and also even Wi-Fi as a carrier wave. See, so even that term I'd have to break down for some of you what a carrier wave is. But we can basically send and transmit our frequency databases through the existing infrastructure that has been built, the 3G, 4G, and Wi-Fi. So if a person actually can plug their headset and their transducer into their actual cell phone, as you know, there's almost no lag time with how information and frequency and the sound of the voice and all these things are being broadcast back and forth between you and your device. So we've done this for years, and there's almost no difference in the accuracy that we can extract remotely or in person. So if you want to make more income and work with people literally anywhere in the world, or we have some health centers and clinics that make 6 figures a month by just having people send their urine, saliva, and hair. This is another really accurate way. It takes a lot to explain. I know it looks really fancy. It takes a lot to explain how we are actually energetically using certain frequencies to extract certain molecular, biomolecular compounds in these tissue types. Germany actually, and Russia, but Germany has done some incredible research in how you do that. There's actually standalone companies that have devices, they sell clinics just for doing hair only, where it's not like a traditional chemical lab assay for hair, for like hair mineral tests or something like that. There's more that you can actually find in hair. There's a lot of other compounds, but you have to test it bioenergetically in order to extract that information algorithmically. So we have a lot of clinics that are very successful, and they just work with people remotely. They send these things in these tubes, they mail it to them, and then they'll basically do a consultation virtually over the phone, and then they also will send them some herbs or supplements, and they'll track their progress like every 3 months or whatever it is. They'll charge them for all of the tests. They'll charge them for the consultation time. They'll charge them for the supplements. You can also make a type of homeopathic remedies with this device as well. Let me just show you that really briefly. So this is all covered in the Cephi, Subtle Energetic Frequency Imprinter, where you can actually make homeopathic remedies here. It takes a lot to explain how that's possible, because the field of homeopathy goes back 200 years, probably in maybe like 60 years ago, I'm going to say. They also found that you can make homeopathic types of remedies through other types of electromagnetic hardware, where you could actually take a full spectrum imprint, like a snapshot of a substance, and then basically turn that into different types of storage, in a sense, frequency patterns and signals. And honestly, that's all anything is anyways from a physics perspective. It's just like if you can then actually store that now into these different devices and technologies, and then basically imprint your own sugar pills and produce your own remedies, We also have some inputted, like Bach flower essences. You can also copy other homeopathics as well out there, and you can actually custom tailor them. So after, imagine all of that biometric data diagnostics that we got. So we know a lot about the person. If we were to actually make them a remedy, we could actually tune that to incorporate all of the other frequencies of information that are needed for this individual. So it can be very highly customized homeopathics that cannot normally be done through traditional homeopathic methods. There's so many things here, and there's honestly more programs too in the Pro, which we could get into another time. There's so much I could tell you that's just really far out there. We do have some rife frequencies incorporated in here for specific organs and conditions. If you're a Pro licensed, we have 1,900 drugs and medicines that are digital equivalents. So you can actually take analog to digital imprints, energy signatures. There's very sophisticated ways of doing that, and we have a 1,900 list. We have now people for years that have gotten off their medications and switched over to the homeopathic versions with no side effects, superior results, and it's also a way with the doctor to wean their way off of certain sorts of medications and actually heal the body at the same time. That's probably the best way to do it, is to do it with those remedy drug equivalents. So that's only available if you're a practitioner, but people get phenomenal results with that. And you can, of course, track the progress to see if they are getting good results. Things like quantum, and I'll just end on this because I know this is getting a little long. Quantum affirmations. There's so much you can do when you work with some of these different fields of electrotherapy and working with the physics of different sorts of waves. Think about this for a second. When you actually are talking and you're saying something, some sort of message, some sort of statement, first off, those statements, what you hear when you hear something, words, the language, you can have an emotional and mental reaction to that, right? And that can actually have a biochemistry effect, okay? A lot of that also has its own biophysics explanation to it. How is it that you can also say something and say it into a phone, and that can be transmitted in a different form through the air, through antennas, and that can be then retranslated from that energy digital packet of pattern, that digital signal can actually be turned back into the sound, decompressed, and then you can actually understand it, right? But what if you didn't actually turn it back into, let's say, English? You can actually broadcast, you can create your own sentences or affirmations, for example, and you can broadcast that language, if you will, but more in a different form of frequency, wavelength, or band of energy. And so what that means is that you can actually receive that in your body, in your brain, in a different kind of way. And it has actually many times a more powerful effect than actually saying the affirmation. So you can just imagine all the different kind of like healing or therapeutic applications you can do with something like that. I'm just barely scratching the surface of this device. So what's nice about it is it's a great complement, adjunct therapy tool to acupuncture. You can work with people in your office. You can work remotely. It can bring in new forms of income. And obviously there's other types of modalities here that you can, again, add on to your clinic. So if you have any questions about this so far, obviously we can take a deeper dive. There's also ways where you can sell this equipment and actually get a monthly commission off of maybe your clients or practitioners that are paying per month. So you can actually make income and revenue from that. A lot of people, when they see this technology, they want to own it and purchase their own. So you do have the ability to make a commission on that and also make a monthly commission if that person keeps on using the program and using their device. So there is that side standpoint as well too, where along the way, as you do your acupuncture and other modalities, you can also build up this residual income that comes in per month, and that's a type of affiliate marketing program. So we can always chat about that another time as well in future videos or in a meeting. So thanks for watching.